Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, Counterspy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the inner sanctum.
Don-maclaughlin, mandel-kramer in Philip H. Lord's fictionalized version of the FBI Counterspy. This episode goes back to November 3rd, 1950, and it's the case of the Carbon Consul.
The National Broadcasting Company presents Counterspy.
Washington calling David Harding, Counterspy. Washington calling David Harding, Counterspy.
Harding, Counterspy. Calling Washington.
United States Counterspies, especially appointed to investigate and combat the enemies of our country, both at home and abroad.
Tonight, the case of the Carbon Consul.
Oh, come on, Horace. Must you walk so slowly?
Lydia, this African sun's the hottest I've been under during the whole world cruise. I'm not going to run in it.
Oh, we'll never see the native quarter at this rate.
I didn't want to see it in the first place.
You never want to see anything except the bottom of a highball glass.
Well, what's so wonderful about this section? It's dirty, hot, and the natives aren't exactly smiling at us.
Oh, you're just imagining things. Besides, this is atmosphere.
So I smell. I still say, watch where you're going.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't look where I was going.
Doesn't the white lady have eyes?
Well, I was just...
Or perhaps the walks of my native Tobasaland are not wide enough. I should step in the streets to allow the grand lady to pass.
Look, my wife apologized.
How gracious to a poor, humble native that the American should demean himself so.
Well, I never...
Come on, Lydia, let's get out of here.
Yes, leave. This is our land. Africa for the Africans.
Well, I never... Horace, are you going to let him get...
Keep quiet and keep walking. I told you the natives weren't really smiling.
But it was just an accident.
Yeah, that fellow was looking for trouble. See, he's got a crowd around him, Lydia. He's haranguing them.
Oh, he's pointing at us.
Come on, Lydia. We've got to get to the American consulate.
Horace, they're coming after us.
Watch out, Lydia. They're going to throw things.
Horace! Oh, like that!
Come on, Lydia. This way. Run! That's just the way it was, Mr. Burton. The whole thing started from Mrs. Walters bumping into the native.
I see.
And then the brute started shouting at me as though I'd attacked him. I was never so frightened in my life. I still haven't got my breath back. And this dress...
I'll see that restitution is made for the damage, Mrs. Walters.
The devil with that man. You're the American consul here in this heaven-forsaken country. Can't you see that American citizens are afforded some protection?
We do our best, Mr. Walters.
If we hadn't reached the consulate grounds, we might have been killed.
Mr. Walters, I'll enter a formal protest to the government of Tobasaland.
All right, and by gosh, you tell them that if they can't keep law and order here, we'll come over and do it for them.
I know how you feel. Mrs. Walters, I'll want you to dictate a formal statement of what happened to my secretary.
I certainly will, and I remember everything. You ready, Mr. Burton? She's one of them. She's
Mrs. Walters, please. Orissa, there's been another anti-American outbreak. Mr. and Mrs. Walters here were the targets of it. I want you to take down their statement of the incident.
Yes, Mr. Burton.
Make several copies. I'll want one each for the authorities here, President Dinard and Police Chief Monaca. And, of course, be sure to send a copy to the African desk of the State Department, Washington. They may want to take drastic action.
If Mr. Peters is in the Counterspy Statistical Department, will he please report to Mr. Harding immediately? If Mr. Peters is in the Counterspy Statistical Department, will he please...
Hello, Mr. Harding. I didn't think you'd gotten back from the State Department so quickly.
Everything happens quickly these days, Peter.
More trouble overseas?
Yes.
Asia?
This time, Africa. but it's all part of the same picture. Tobasoland, one of the few non-colonial countries on that continent.
Oh, yes. The papers yesterday. Anti-American riots.
Yeah. Bad for us.
The State Department going to take any action, Chief?
Well, they may have to eventually, but first they want to get a better picture of what's happening in that country.
So?
So, Peters, I want you to go through the personnel records of all our counterspy agents. Extract the records of all our Negro agents. Get them here as soon as possible.
Okay, Chief.
We've got to work fast. The State Department wants to find out whether this anti-American feeling is foreign-inspired before they're forced to make any more protests to the government of Tobasoland.
President Dinar, my country has asked me as consul to hand you, as head of the government of Tobasoland, this note, formally protesting the treatment of our nationals in your country.
I accept the note, Mr. Burton, with regret, and assure you that we will do all in our power to apprehend and punish the instigators of this disorder.
And now, Mr. President, may I presume to be less formal?
Yes, of course, Mr. Burton.
And unofficial?
Yes?
While awaiting your arrival, I've been talking to your state police chief, Manaka, here. He has some interesting ideas.
I'm sure he has.
I have only tried to be helpful, Mr. President.
I see, Manaka. Now, these interesting ideas, what are they?
I prefer that you hear them from the lips of Mr. Burton. He may give them more weight than a mere police official can.
Your Majesty is most unusual, Manaka. Go on, Mr. Burton.
Well, as your chief explains it, Mr. President, the main difficulty of law enforcement here is one of tools.
Weapons, you mean?
Yes, Mr. President.
I can hardly agree, Manaka. It was one man who incited this riot. Surely, if you find him, it will take no more than one weapon to arrest him.
Admitted, Mr. President, but one man is but a single grain in the sands of unrest that surround us. Had I weapons, an efficient police force, I would soon quell this anti-Americanism in our country.
The force quells nothing. Or do you agree with my chief, Mr. Burton?
Well, after all, when I came here to take up my consular post a year ago, I was kidnapped, held for 5 hours by insurgents.
Yes, that is a painful reminder, Mr. Burton.
It might well have developed into a serious international incident if it hadn't been for my prompt liberation by Chief Manaka here and his officers.
I know that, Mr. Burton, and I was grateful to you for minimizing the affair to your government.
Then why not listen to Mr. Burton's advice now?
You both urge me to request the United States government to send us arms and possibly even advisors to help us administer the internal security of Tobasoland. Is that it?
Exactly, Mr. President.
Do that, and we will be able to cope with any disorders that arise, no matter how grave they may be.
I'm afraid I must still disagree with you, gentlemen.
But
I am well aware that there is much discontent in the country, and that in some manner that discontent has been channeled against America, Mr. Burton.
In that case, why
importing American arms and advisors would do nothing but crystallize the unrest. Put your country in the light of an invader. No, Mr. Burton, before I take any such step, I want to discover the reason for this sudden upsurge. This hatred many of my people have for all that is American. If you or your government can assist us in this, I will gladly accept your help. That, Mr. Burton, you can report to Washington.
This way, Carter.
Right behind you, Mr. Peters.
Mr. Harding, this is Agent Lincoln Carter.
How do you do, Carter?
Hello, Mr. Harding.
Have a seat.
Oh, thank you.
Will you want me, Chief?
No, Peters. I'd rather have you set about arranging the details of Carter's transportation, if you will.
I'll get right on it, Mr. Harding.
Doesn't sound as though I'm going to be in Washington very long, Mr. Harding.
No, you won't be, Carter. Not if you're the right man for this job we have.
I hope I am, sir.
Now, let's see. According to your personnel record, you went to Howard University, got a B.A. and M.A. there.
That's right.
Then you did postgraduate work at Columbia, earning the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, huh?
Yes, sir.
Your thesis for your doctorate was on African languages and dialects. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Harding, but...
You, speak these various dialects?
Many of them. The study of African culture and history has been sort of a hobby with me.
Uh-huh.
Something like a Mayflower descendant tracing his antecedents.
I see. Well, tell me, Do you know much about the country of Tobasso land?
If it doesn't sound too immodest, quite a bit. As one of the few Negro republics outside of Liberia, I've naturally been interested in it.
Yes, so is the State Department.
Yes, I know. I've been reading in the papers about the recent outbreaks of anti-Americanism there.
You have any opinions on that?
Oh, frankly, I've been puzzled. The history of that country has always oriented it toward America. We've helped and aided her in many ways. Why this sudden outburst should occur is beyond me.
Now, come over here, Carter. Take a look at this map. Let's consider the question from the viewpoint of geography.
What do you mean?
Well, Tobasso land could be the eastern doorway to Africa. A foothold there, and any power from the east could gradually spread throughout the entire continent.
Oh, you think Russia
Now,
might...
thinking is unimportant. It's knowledge that counts. Because if the State Department's suspicions are true, it means a reformulation of our policy in that area of the world.
I can understand that, sir.
And it's going to be up to you, Carter, to find out if those suspicions are true.
The job you were speaking of?
Yes. Now, you'll work undercover among the citizens of Tobasso land. I want you to find out and report where this anti-American feeling is arising from, and whether it's being provoked deliberately.
I see, sir.
Now, because of the nature of communications in the country, you'll have to transmit your reports by diplomatic pouch.
Through the consul there?
Yes, that's right. He'll be notified to allow you the use of the pouch.
Well, what about identification? Will I carry any with me?
No, except for one simple device to establish your first contact with the consul.
What will that be, sir?
This pencil. Now, wait. I'll break it. There. You take this half.
Right, sir.
I'll see that our consul in Tobasso land gets the other half. When you present the matching half, that will be your identification.
Then I take it I'm not to report to the consul immediately.
No. In fact, don't get in touch with him until you've compiled as complete a report as you can on the situation.
Yes, sir.
Frankly, Carter, if what we suspect is true, your usefulness will be very short-lived after that first report, because the other side has espionage agents as well.
I understand, Mr. Harding.
Now, I know I don't have to stress the importance of this mission to you, Carter, so good luck. And remember, take no unnecessary chances. You may be facing a crafty and dangerous enemy.
November 3rd, 1950, Counterspy on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, more of Counterspy, November 3rd, 1950.
Yes?
I would speak to the American consul.
Just like that. Do you think the American consul speaks to any native who walks in from the street?
He will speak with me, woman.
Indeed. Then in that case, what name shall I announce?
None.
None? You haven't even got a name?
No one much less tongue than you have. Take this to your master, woman. He will see me at once.
A stub of a pencil. Hardly an impressive introduction.
Must I beg you to take it into Mr. Burton?
I would not.
Please, woman, take it to him. It is most urgent.
Very well. Sir?
Yes?
In here.
Oh, thank you.
This is the man, Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Orissa. You may leave.
Your secretary is a very efficient watchdog, Mr. Burton.
Orissa, treasure. A native girl who went to college in the States. Indispensable to me.
I'm sure she is.
But enough of that. It's a relief to learn that you finally arrived, Mr. Carter.
I've been here in Tobasso land nearly 4 weeks.
Well, since I got that pencil stub and the note from Mr. Harding, I've expected you for every day of those 4 weeks.
I had no reason to contact you before.
You have now?
I think so. I've made a report of my activities these past 4 weeks, and as Mr. Harding undoubtedly explained, I am to submit it to Washington through your diplomatic pouch.
Yes, I know. I have dispatches to send out myself. I'll have Orissa bring it in now. It'll be leaving in the morning.
I'm glad of that, Mr. Burton.
You, uncovered something of importance?
I think so. But you, of course, are free to read the report, Mr. Burton.
Thank you. I shall.
You rang, Mr. Burton?
Yes. Bring in the diplomatic pouch, please.
Yes, Mr. Burton.
Now, Mr. Carter, is there any other way I can be of assistance to your mission?
At the moment, no.
Well, suppose I have occasion to get in touch with you.
You shouldn't have, but if you do, I'm staying at a small shack, number 13 Garden Alley.
The pouch, Mr. Burton.
Oh, thank you, Rissa. Rissa, in the future, when this gentleman calls, he's to be admitted immediately.
Yes, Mr. Burton. I'll make certain he's admitted in the future.
That is, if I come anymore.
Don't tell me your first call is to be your last.
It may well be, Mr. Burton. It may well be.
Hello. It is Police Chief Monaco who speaks. Oh, yes. I see. He knows much? Bad. What, you know where he is? Excellent. The address? 13 Garden Alley. It will be taken care of immediately. Goodbye. Bernarda.
Yes, Chief Monaco.
There is work for you.
More Americans arriving in our land?
Yes.
It will be simple. Each successive riot becomes easier to incite. I only hope they are as apt targets as those Walters tourists were.
This is not work for a sharp tongue, but a sharp blade.
Blade?
Yes, this American is no tourist, but a spy and of our color.
Oh?
He must die. There will undoubtedly be a great uproar on his death. So it will be best if you take to the jungles after the job is done.
Yes, Monaco.
I will get word to you when it is safe to return.
As you say.
Now take your blade and call on the man. His address is 13 Garden Alley.
Kerosene lamps. There. I've only... Well, I brought only 2 feet in with me. Yet I see 2 more peeking from beneath that curtain. Very tiny feet, too. I suggest the owner of them come out before I put a bullet through that curtain. Orissa, such a pleasure and a surprise. Seems I won't need my gun after all.
Hardly.
Come a little closer to the lamp, please. The flickering kerosene light scarcely does you justice. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?
Curiosity.
A woman has much of that, but still... You were expecting somebody?
No.
Well, I certainly wasn't. We shall see.
American dog!
Look out, the knife!
No, you don't.
Watch out!
I will cut your heart out!
Not yet, you won't.
The lamp, it's falling!
Let go!
The floor! The curtain! Fire!
What the devil? Orissa.
Mr. Burton, that man who called on you today.
What about him? What are you doing here at this time of night?
I passed the place where he was staying. His shack is in flames. The whole native quarter is going up. I thought...
You thought right, girl. Come in.
I didn't know whether or not...
Call Chief Monaco. Tell him about the fire. Say I'll meet him there and explain everything. This may have grave international repercussions. Chief Monaco.
Mr. Burton.
What happened? Orissa said there was a fire, but this whole block burned to the ground.
Our native quarters do not resist fire very well.
An obvious statement.
Fortunately, we have it under control now.
The drums, the chanting, what are they for?
To appease the fire gods. Many of my countrymen still place their fate in the ancient customs of their fathers. I myself prefer water to fight fire.
Well, at the moment, the drums are useful. I think we can talk safely under their cover.
We can, Burton. And we have nothing to fear.
The Counterspy agent is dead?
Yes. We recovered his body. Bernarda's knife deep in his heart.
You have a most efficient sergeant, Monaco.
Your country, and I don't mean America,
Naturally.
will pay well for this, I hope.
Extremely well.
What about the report you told me about over the telephone? Will that reach the Counterspy chief?
I shall see that it does. But it'll be my version of what's happening in this country, not his agent's.
Good.
And that, coupled with the death of this agent, will force President Denard to request American arms and men. And that should provide you with a revolutionary situation that you can exploit to the utmost.
And I shall, Mr. Burton. As long as you continue to make it worth my while.
I'll continue. With good fortune and a little effort, we may be able to turn this incident into a long and costly guerrilla war involving the great United States.
November 3rd, 1950, Counterspy on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The conclusion follows these important words from your favorite radio station. Oh, and we'll hear from Claudia, too. Thank you for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now the conclusion of Counterspy, the case of the Carbon Consul, as it was originally broadcast November 3rd, 1950.
Mr. Burton?
Oh, Orissa, I'm glad you waited here.
The fire. Was anyone...
His body was found in the shack. The man who was here.
Oh.
Get a pencil and paper, please. I want to dictate a cablegram immediately. The address is Mr. David Harding, Counterspy Headquarters, Washington, D.C.
Mr. Harding! Mr. Harding!
Oh, you made good time, Peters. Did you get all the material?
Here it is in this envelope, Chief. The complete personnel records of all employees at our Tabassalam consular office.
Good. Now, I don't know how long I'll be gone, so you take over from me here.
Right, Chief.
If anything urgent comes up, get in touch with me through the consulate.
All right, sir. And good luck. I hope you manage to make someone pay for Carter's death.
I intend to, Peters.
So long, Chief.
Mr. Harding?
Yes, that's right. Mr. Burton?
Yes, sir. I have a car right over here.
Good.
We'll go direct to my office. Unless you'd rather pay your respects to the Foreign Office of Tabassaland first.
No, Mr. Burton, your office first. I want to interview all the employees there before taking any other action.
And this, Mr. Harding, is the only employee left to interview. My personal secretary, Orissa.
How do you do, miss? You be seated.
Thank you.
I imagine you want this to be private.
If you don't mind, Mr. Burton.
Not at all, Mr. Harding. I'll be outside if you want me.
Now, Miss Orissa, let's talk about how you were so opportunely on hand for the fire that killed our counterspy agent, Mr. Carter. Mr. Burton.
Yes?
I've finished here. I wonder if you could arrange an audience for me with the president and the police chief of Tabassaland.
Right away, Mr. Harding. Will you, want me there?
Yes, Mr. Burton. I definitely want you there.
Mr. Harding, I can only express my deep regret at the death of your man. It will only add more fuel to the strain between our two countries.
Perhaps not, Mr. President.
Oh?
You're aware of what Mr. Carter's mission here was?
To investigate the rise of feeling against the United States among my countrymen.
Yes, that's right.
Had he made any reports to you before this tragedy?
One, which I read just this morning.
May we inquire as to his findings, Mr. Harding?
Of course, Chief Manaka. He reported that the hatred of the United States arose out of local circumstances, that there was no outside provocation, and recommended that the United States aid your country in dealing with this by sending weapons and advisors.
You see, Mr. President, it is as I and Mr. Burton have been saying.
I cannot believe it.
I know how you must feel, Mr. President, but when his conclusion is the same as ours, nothing remains for you but to take our advice.
I wouldn't say that, Mr. Burton.
What do you mean?
You see, the report I read was not written by my agent Carter.
What?
That's right, Chief Manaka.
Then who was it written by?
Mr. Burton, our eminent American consul.
Me?
That's right, Mr. Burton, and I've got two witnesses to that fact. All right, Orissa, come in and bring the gentleman with you.
Hello, Mr. Burton.
Carter.
That's right, Mr. Burton.
Mr. Harding, Burton's got a gun.
Look out, Chief. No, you don't. Oh. Carter, see about him.
He's out cold, Mr. Harding.
You attacked him, your own consul?
Yes, Mr. President, but he was not the real American consul.
I don't understand.
You remember, Mr. President, Burton was abducted briefly when he first arrived here.
Why, yes.
And rescued by your chief, Manaka.
Mr. Harding.
The game's up, Manaka. You were assisting another foreign power, the power whom the so-called Burton was spying for.
Well, you can't...
You sent that man to kill me, Chief Manaka. Larissa recognized him as Sergeant Bonata, a member of your own police force.
And when Carter killed him instead and the fire started, he decided to use that fact as a trap for you and Burton.
But how did Carter know Burton was on the other side?
Because Burton was the only one besides Orissa who knew Carter's address.
You will never...
Stop him, Carter!
You're not getting away. Let go.
Well, you've got a nice right there, Carter. Mr. President, Minaka is a citizen of your country. I'm sure you'll know how to deal with him.
I will, Mr. Harding, but please, one more point.
Yes.
If Manaka and Burton were the instigators of the anti-Americanism, why did they keep insisting on my seeking your country's aid in suppressing that feeling?
Because they were aware, Mr. President, that once such a policy was started, we would have to keep sending more aid and more arms. It would have been another drain on America's might, and there's nothing the power he represented would like better than drain off our strength to weaken us for any major conflict that may eventually come. Well, this at least is one spot where they failed in that strategy, and we'll see that they fail again.
Tonight's Counterspy program originated in New York, was directed by Marks B. Loeb, dramatized by Palma Thompson, and featured Don MacLachlan and Mandel-Kramer. Counterspy is produced by Phillips H. Lord.
November 3rd, 1950, Counterspy on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, an episode of the soap opera Claudia. This episode, November 3rd, 1948.
And now, Claudia.
Claudia, come over here to the sofa a moment. I want to measure this sleeve.
Just a second, Mama. I'm in the middle of a sentence.
Don't tell me you're still writing that one thank you letter.
I am. And I don't know what to say. Honestly, you'd think Julia'd know better than to send Bobby a present.
Why shouldn't she send Bobby a present?
Well, in the first place, because he's not old enough to know it's a present for him. And in the second place, I am old enough to know that I have to write a thank you note for it.
A sad state of affairs indeed.
Therefore, I wish Bobby were a little older and I were a little younger.
Then he'd write the letter and you'd get the presents.
Exactly. Really, sending a silver rattle to a baby not 4 months old. I never heard of such a silly thing.
Babies love rattles.
But it's so expensive. Oh, well, she never had a baby of her own, so no wonder she doesn't realize that they don't know the difference between silver and celluloid.
And Julia doesn't care whether the baby does or not. She does, and that's all that matters.
She really is terribly generous. She's given us the most wonderful present since we're married. I was certainly lucky when I drew Julia as my husband's sister-in-law, wasn't I? And I don't mean that greedy.
You were lucky when you drew your husband.
Yup. And I knew it the minute I set eyes on him. I figured right away he was the right father for my children.
That's an interesting variation on an old theme.
What I like so much about David as a father is that he's never fatuous about it. He didn't even seem impressed this morning when Bobby reached for his orange juice.
Nothing to be impressed about.
Has any son of yours ever reached for his orange juice, Mrs. Brown?
You were all the son I ever had. Not very proud of you, but you reached for things in a little less than 4 months, too. All babies do.
All babies?
There's nothing precocious about it, nothing at all.
You take the pleasure out of everything. Still, I expected David to be a little impressed. He's not supposed to know that Bobby is just average. He's his father.
David's impressed. Impressed that any child of yours is even average.
Dear Mama, you say the sweetest things to me. Anyway, he is getting frightfully cute.
Who, David or the baby?
David, of course. He's starting to act as if he really knew what he was doing. He follows me around the room with his eyes. And he gurgles when I pick him up. You know what? I've decided to keep him.
That's good. It's such a nuisance exchanging things these days.
Say, I wonder where David is. He should be back from the village by now.
Stop worrying about him.
Well, he's not around to hear me. Hope nothing's happened.
Now, what could have happened?
Well, he only went downtown to buy some tobacco. He's been gone for over half an hour.
David drives sensibly. He doesn't rush when there's no reason, like someone I know.
I hope David will be proud of his son.
Changing the subject, eh?
You know, it must be awful when a father isn't.
Get back to that thank you note of yours. I'm getting dizzy.
Just finishing it. Love, Claudia.
And come over here and let me measure this sleeve.
Mama, this sweater is going to be beautiful when you're finished. I hope you realize my feelings have been very hurt lately.
What have I done now?
Well, you've been knitting for Bobby for the last, 4 and 9. For the last 13 months. It's about time you got back to me. I'm practically threadbare.
Claudia, stand still.
Scratch, please. Right there, behind my left shoulder blade.
How can I measure you if you wiggle round?
Get the right place, Mama. Right there, under the left shoulder blade.
Why don't you buy yourself a back scratcher?
Are you resigning from your job?
I am.
Resignation not accepted. Put more emotion into it, Mrs. Brown.
The minute David comes in, I'm going up to bed.
I ask you to do one little thing for me, and the next thing I hear, you're going up to bed.
Now, that's enough. Hold out your arm.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's a pretty pose.
Hey, David, you're home.
Will you stand still, Claudia? You just made me drop 6 stitches.
It's my husband's fault. What were you doing downtown so long?
I had a rendezvous with a redhead.
What color was her hair?
Blonde.
Oh, I love blonde redheads.
David, your wife is impossible.
Thank you.
I've been trying to measure her arm for the last 5 minutes. She simply can't hold it still.
Hold your arm still.
I am.
You're not. If you don't behave properly, I'll add 3 inches to this sweater and give it to David.
6 inches on each side.
Bragging. Now tell me, what were you doing downtown so long?
I stopped in to see a double feature.
Any good?
No, terrible.
I'm going to bed.
What's the matter? Can't you stand my company for even 5 minutes, Mrs. Brown?
You're all right alone, David, but the woman you married is a little difficult to take.
Claudia, have you been disrespectful to your poor old mother?
How can you accuse me of such a thing, David? You know I treat Mama with the utmost respect. Come on, David. You haven't told me what you were doing downtown so long.
May as well confess, David.
Confess what?
What took you so long? Buying a can of tobacco?
Oh, you too.
What?
You're just as inquisitive as your daughter.
I inherited it from her.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Here it is. 1 can of tobacco.
Is that all? Mama, I'm suspicious.
I'm suspicious, too.
What's that bulge in your coat pocket, David?
Mrs. Sherlock Holmes.
You may as well give up, David. She'll nag you until you confess. And if she doesn't, I will.
Darling, really, I'm touched beyond words. What is it?
What is what?
The present you bought me.
Who said anything about bringing you a present?
The look in your eye, the look of a man who just bought his wife a present for no reason.
I didn't buy you any present for no reason.
That's why I love you. You're such a liar.
Oh, don't keep her in suspense. She's bursting.
I can't imagine what it is. I haven't been hinting for anything lately.
Look now. How could I buy you a present? What store would be open at this hour of the night?
The stationery store where you bought the cigar.
Greedy, isn't she? She was feeling sorry for herself because Bobby was getting all the presents for the family.
Oh, I'm afraid you're in for an awful letdown.
Isn't he sweet?
I am not sweet.
And we were going to scold him for being out late.
It just shows you must never jump to conclusions.
No.
Now, David, out with it so I can go to bed.
All right. Here it is.
See, Mama? I know my husband's.
Go on, open it.
It's all wrapped up so pretty. Sort of heavy, too. Can't imagine what it is.
Well, you'll never guess.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you're not the kind of a husband, David, that the minute he has a son, he forgets all about his wife.
What does that mean?
Well, just that it's a waste of money to buy things for a baby. Of course, it's all right for Julia, wasting little money buying baby a silver rattle, but I'm simply not going to allow myself any such indulgences.
You're not.
You know, this afternoon when Mom and I were downtown, we absolutely forbade ourselves to buy anything for Bobby.
You did.
In spite of the fact that he sort of sees things now and he reaches out for them. Still, he's much too young to know how to enjoy anything.
Stop giving us lectures, Claudia, and open that package.
Well, I just wanted to make David realize that I'm not too young for this sort of thing. And I'm not too old either.
Maybe you'd better not open the package, darling.
Oh, I'm opening it. David,
Hmm?
were your ears burning while you were driving home from downtown?
No, not especially.
Mama was saying all sorts of nice things about you.
That's not true, David. I didn't open my mouth. Claudia was doing all the talking as usual.
Mama was saying that you were a wonderful father because you didn't dote.
No, Bobby's not much to dote about. He's just like any other baby. Sleeping all the time, eating all the time, and wet all the time.
Claudia, will you please stop fidoodling over that package? I'm going to have a nervous breakdown.
I'm opening it, Mama. I'm just sidetracked a little.
Then give it to me. I can open a package and get sidetracked at the same time.
Well, you're older than I am. Here we are. Last layer of paper.
You're going to be awfully disappointed.
Nothing you could buy for me could ever disappoint me, darling. Before I look and see what it is, I just want you to know that anything you give me, I love.
Well, just open the package.
Gosh, everybody looking at me this way. I'm getting so nervous.
Careful you don't break anything.
Oh, look. Isn't it beautiful? It's a locomotive.
Exactly. It's a locomotive.
A black locomotive.
It is. Just what I wanted, isn't it?
I thought you'd been ailing for one.
Yes, I've been wishing for months that somebody would give me a black locomotive.
Yes, you mentioned it to me once or twice.
I told you you'd be disappointed.
Who said anything about being disappointed?
Now, maybe this will teach you not to jump to conclusions.
I don't see why you say that. This is a stunning black locomotive.
It is that. And look here, let me show you something. It shoots sparks out of the funnel when it rolls across the floor.
It does?
It does?
Works just like a real one.
What will they think of next?
I don't know. They certainly do think of wonderful things for toys these days. Now look at it. Look at this contraption.
Miraculous.
It's not miraculous, but it's pretty wonderful.
If you say so, dear.
You're disappointed, aren't you?
Why, that's the last thing I am. Just because I expected it to be a present for me, that I'm disappointed that it isn't. Ridiculous.
Well, I would be if it were me.
Oh, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Not if it were a present for your son instead.
Well, yes, you're right. I figure that every little boy ought to have a locomotive.
Did you say little boy, David?
Well, he's 4 months old, isn't he? And he's reaching for things, isn't he? Well, this morning he grabbed his orange juice right out of your hand.
That makes an old man of him.
With a long white beard. Claudia, what was that you were saying a moment ago about David and doting?
I remember all too well.
I am not a doting father. Now, here, concentrate. You wind it up this way.
Yes.
There now. Now you put it on the floor, give it a shove, and it rolls off. There, you see the sparks starting to fly out of the smokestack?
Mama, I was all wrong. All wrong.
What about now?
Just shows you can be married to a husband for over a year and not know him at all.
What have I done now?
You're not a doting father, darling. You're not even a doting husband. David, you bought that locomotive for yourself.
Bought it for myself? I did not. Did I?
Did you?
Well, if you don't tell Bobby, I'll let you play with it, too.
When the clock strikes noon, that's the signal for a hasty bite of lunch in many households. Nutritionists frown on hasty eating. They suggest you sit down and relax at all meals. Why not pause and lunch refreshed with ice-cold Coca-Cola? You'll find an ice-cold bottle of Coke with your noonday sandwich or snack both relaxing and refreshing.
Oh, Joe, mind if I gather some information from you?
Well, not at all, Mrs. Brown. What's on your mind?
Nothing serious. I was just wondering how many times you'd bought presents for yourself under the guise of buying them for your son.
Not once, Mrs. Brown. Not twice. Perhaps 3 times.
Good. Fathers sometimes let themselves be neglected.
I can't complain about that.
And neither can David, I suppose. Especially tomorrow.
And tomorrow?
Claudia meets Jessie Mason. She's the widow of the man who was killed driving into David's car.
Oh. And I suppose it makes Claudia appreciate David about twice as much.
That's the way life works. Well, be seeing you, Mr. King.
Goodbye, Mrs. Brown. Thanks for stopping by. And remember, every day, Monday through Friday, Claudia comes to you transcribed with the best wishes of your friendly neighbor who bottles Coca-Cola. So listen again tomorrow at the same time. And now this is Joe King saying au revoir.
November 3rd, 1948, Claudia on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. We thank you for making us a part of your day. Would you thank this station, support their advertisers? It's their kindness and courtesy that allow us to be with you each and every time you roll around here on your favorite radio station. If you miss a day, you don't have to miss a single show. All of our shows are available on demand for streaming at classicradio.stream. That is classicradio.stream. Stream our shows on demand. You can learn about building a classic radio collection of your own. You can find our social media links there. There's a list of podcast sites where you can download our shows. And if you want to buy me a coffee, we'll take that buy me a coffee money and build this classic radio theater collection that we have going on here. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tell all your friends the great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.